So what I'm doing here is I'm actually just explaining what I've already done in some of the earlier demonstrations with Karen. There was a gentleman named Arnold Lazarus, PhD. He's long gone now, but Arnold Lazarus was quite a respected thinker back in the 60s and the 70s. And in the Skilled Helper book that was written by an author named Mr. Gerard Egan, I think he's written about 13 versions of this book. I think it was in version 3 he wrote off the Lazarus technique. All right, now he hasn't had this in all the Skilled Helper books. I think it was just in version 3, maybe version 4 as well. Now I actually had a conversation with Jerry last year, and I said, "Oh, Jerry, you wrote about the Lazarus technique. Did you ever meet Arnold Lazarus?" And he said, "Who? What?" He couldn't even remember writing it. He'd literally written that book so many times, he'd forgotten all about what he'd written around about 35 years ago. But I hadn't. This one stuck in my mind. Why? Because it's actually a little technique, a little tool that I've really habitually built into my own day-to-day interactions with people, and also how I relate to things. I like to define myself as being quite a simple man, all right? I don't like unnecessary complexity, nor do I need it, all right? And in fairness, none of us need complexity in our life, because life doesn't have to be so complex. When many of our clients come to us, they're going to come caught and trapped in emotion and subjectivity, and there's going to be all sorts of chaos going on for them sometimes. Sometimes they might be down in the dumps, all doom and gloom, or apprehensive, anxious, or they might be angry or enraged, or they might be ready for giving up the ghost, and they could be absolutely anywhere. So we always need a starting point, and that's where this technique comes into play. Granted, the CBT relationship is always going to be collaborative by nature. It's going to be goal-orientated, solution-focused, so on and so forth. But we've got to get a starting point. We need a goal or an objective, a purpose for the helping relationship. And this is where this comes into play. It's about us just simply breaking down all of our stuff that's going on to just one word that defines what it is that we want. All right, not what we don't want, it's about what we do. In the same book, just to give this Lazarus technique context, Gerard Egan actually shared a story about, I think it was President Bill Clinton, who was taken over from Reagan back in the late 80s or the early 90s? I'm sorry, I cannot remember. My memory fails me here. But what he gave reference to was this meeting that was going on in the White House. Clinton was taken over from Reagan, and once all the paperwork had been signed, the deal had been sealed, Clinton had stood up and said, "Right, I want to go for a walk around one of the most destitute parts of the city." Now, obviously, his advisors strongly warned him against this one, but he said, "I am president. I want to go and get a feel for my people." Kinesthetically, obviously, Clinton was a kinesthetic learner. So off he went. He got his baseball cap on, and I'm sure quite discreetly went for a walk around one part of his city. But it wasn't too long before he was recognised. Obviously, all of the Secret Service agents were around him like a swarm of flies, and there was obviously quite a few local people had quite quickly approached him. And one lady in particular was quite irate, in quite a high energy fashion, was giving voice to all of these things that she wanted, these problems in society, and she just went on and on and on and on. And Clinton didn't respond. He didn't say anything until the lady stopped talking. She was kind of operating and functioning out of a monologue. And once she eventually finished, Clinton just looked her in the eye and said, "Dear woman, what do you want? What do you actually want?" Now, the lady had been given reference to all of the things that she didn't want, all of the issues in society and American culture that she wanted him to fix and all this kind of thing. And this kind of took her aback a little bit, because it does, doesn't it? We can quite easily focus on all the things that we don't want in life, all the things that aren't working about our lives. But when it comes to focusing on what we actually do want in a positive sense, this requires us to really look in a totally different direction, because most people focus more on problems than they do on solutions. Hence the reason CBT is a solution-focused therapy, all right? Keeps things in the positive all of the time. So, Clinton's now waiting for a response, and the lady just took a few moments, and then she said, right, well, we want safer streets for our kids to play. We want, better paid jobs for our husbands, so we can just afford some of life's little luxuries every now and again. We don't want much. We want the drug dealers off our streets. And that's about it. She didn't actually want that much. But, that was quite straightforward to her when, to explain and give voice to what she did want. Before then, it was just like a big rant, and she was giving voice to what she didn't want. And this is an interesting idea, because if you think about sometimes some of the conversations that you'll have with people, especially if you know someone or some people, some family members who just generally seem to be quite negatively focused a lot of the time, it's because they focus on what they don't want, not upon what they do. And this is where the Lazarus technique kind of comes into play. Could you use just one word to tell me what it is you actually do want? And sometimes some people will continue to tell you all about what they don't want. And this is where you don't budge. Okay, so you've just told me again what you don't want, but could you tell me what it is that you actually do want instead? What do you want, stated in the positive? Rather than focusing on problems and wants and goals, which come through this big filter, and this is pretty much what you're going to be presented with, especially in session number 1 or session number 2. If you do start working with clients as a CBT practitioner, what your goal is, pretty much right from the start, is to get all of this through the filter and end up with just one word, just one goal. What do you want? What do you actually want, stated in the positive? Very, very simple process, but this is what you really want to be doing. Earlier on in the CBT helping relationship to the best of your ability, all right? So practice this. If you do have friends, family members, children, and they're just going off in tangents and talking all about the problems and the issues and all the rest of it, so tell me, what do you actually want? And it's not about you having solutions. It's not about you solving the problems for them or anything like this. It's about just them, you giving them space and opportunity to shift their perspective out of the negative and towards the positive. And they can do this all by themselves, just with a little bit of guidance from you. There's a few books which are interesting reads. Some of them are a little bit heavier than others. One of them being In the Mind's Eye, all right? And this is, I think, one of Arnold's first book. And it's where people, a lot of the time, respond more to the visions and the images that go on inside of their head, which I know you'll be aware of now, and this is how Karen pretty much relates to life. She's very, very visual. And this is a book around working with people who are kind of visual learners who relate to visions and images inside of their head instead of feelings or noises. Don't believe it for a minute. Another book that he wrote, which is generally when people tell you all about what their problem is, 9 times out of 10, what a person thinks a problem is, isn't the problem. Karen, for example, she thought that her problem was how she felt. Well, it wasn't. What the problem actually was an unhelpful thinking pattern or an unhelpful belief, and this was that uncertainty is bad. All right. So another really interesting book that will just give you a deeper understanding of this if you want to. Now, remember, these books, I don't think they're still in publication. They're not still being published, so you might have to go online and settle for like an e-copy, or you might be able to find a second-hand book in one of the online stores. The last book I'll recommend, written by Arnold Lazarus, was Brief but Comprehensive Psychotherapy. Now, this isn't about you becoming a psychotherapist, this course. Oh, no, it's not. He was a psychotherapist. That's how he defined himself. But to be honest with you, that whole book gives us context for CBT and many of the modern applied psychologies, many of which I actually teach today. All right, which means that when we're working with clients, it's not like we need to be doing so for 3 months or 6 months or years on end, kind of like how conventional therapists and psychotherapists used to work. It doesn't have to be like that anymore, right? When we understand how it is that people process events, circumstances, their day-to-day situations, all that we need to understand as helpers or CBT practitioners is that if we can make modifications in how people perceive and interpret their life's events, we can make then massive shifts in their emotional experience, and then also in how they respond to stimuli and the circumstances, situations of life. All right, so the Lazarus technique, very simple. It's about where we will listen to and acknowledge all of the noise that a client might present us with, sometimes maybe for 20 minutes, 30 minutes. But then as soon as we can do, we're just, right, I've heard the problem, they've told us all about the problem, now, what do you want? You've told me all about what you don't want, now what do you want? Then that gives us a starting point for a few CBT-based sessions. So hope you found this interesting. Practice it. Very, very simple. Just one word. Really helps to simplify the helping process.